Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with tandoori lamb. That's right, if you're a fan of lamb, man, are you going to enjoy this. But even if you're not, keep watching, because this amazing marinade is also great on chicken and pork and even beef. And I know the cow is sacred in India, but for me, what better way to celebrate an animal's life than by eating it tandoori style once it's gone? But anyway, that's a moot point since we are using lamb. Or should I say moot point? But anyway, let's go ahead and get started with the first step, which is the aforementioned amazing marinade. And we'll begin with some yogurt. And because of muscle memory, I automatically grabbed the Greek-style yogurt, which is strained and much thicker than regular yogurt. And while both styles are going to work, this stuff is so much thicker, it is a little more difficult to work with. So if I was you, I would just get the regular stuff. But either way, to that we will add some freshly squeezed lemon juice, as well as some grated or very, very, very finely minced onions. We will also do some finely crushed garlic, as well as some freshly grated ginger root. And then as far as the spices go, we're definitely going to want some garam masala, which you will find in the spice aisle of your finer stores. But if you can, I'm going to tell you how to make your own on the blog. And then to that, let's go ahead and add some ground cumin, as well as let's toss in a spoon of paprika. And while we're adding red pepper, let's also add a little or a lot of cayenne. And last but not least, we will finish up with a little bit of turmeric, which apparently if you eat enough of, you'll live to like 100 years old, which I'm not exactly sure is a good thing, but that's a subject for another video. But anyway, once all that's together, what we'll do is take a whisk and give that a mix. And as soon as that's all combined, it's ready to use. And yes, because I did use that Greek-style yogurt, mine's going to be really thick, which is fine. But as I mentioned, if you use the regular stuff, this is going to be a little thinner and easier to work with. Not to mention probably much more attractive. But anyway, we'll go ahead and give that a mix and simply set that aside while we prep our lamb. And while there are many cuts that would work nicely here, I'm going to go with what I think is a very underused cut of lamb, the top sirloin. And as you can see, they're pretty much all meat, except there is this one little flap that has a piece of silver skin attached. So what we'll do is cut that off right where it naturally separates. And then do the old stick the knife under the silver skin and trim it off. And other than that little bit of basic butchery, we are pretty much ready to cut this up into chunks. And while I trim that off, I should mention the reason I like the top sirloin is that it's going to be very similar to using leg of lamb, but I find it's less expensive and doesn't have as much connective tissue. But if you can't find it, the leg will work, as would shoulder, which is always nice on the grill. But anyway, once we've removed those flaps and trimmed off the silver skin, I like to cut the remaining clod in half, and then we'll cut it across like this into whatever size pieces we want, which of course the exact size will be up to you. You guys are, after all, the Daft Punks of your chunks. But be careful not to make them too small. All right, we don't want the inside cooking through before the outside has time to get a little bit of color. So I'm going to go ahead and chunk that up as shown, at which point we can toss that into our marinade. And then besides the meat, I'm also going to add the salt here, which I could have added to the marinade, but it really doesn't matter as long as we add it in at some point. And then we'll go ahead and mix this up until we're very confident every single one of those chunks is evenly coated. Oh, by the way, regarding the salt, some recipes call for salting the meat first, letting that sit for a while, and then adding it to the marinade, which probably is a little more effective, but since I'm going to leave this overnight, I really don't notice a big difference. But anyway, we'll go ahead and combine all that together thoughtfully and thoroughly, at which point we can sort of scrape everything down and clean up the sides of the bowl before topping it with plastic and transferring it into the fridge for an overnight marinade, which is my preference. But if time management is not your thing, you can let this go for as little as 4 hours, and it will still come out pretty nice. But anyway, regardless of how long we let it marinate, we'll go ahead and impale it on some metal skewers. And as I'm grabbing these chunks, I'm kind of wiping off most of the marinade. But don't worry about getting it all. We're going to give it a little wipe later. And as you're doing this, I want you to concentrate on two things. First, and most importantly, do not stab your hand or fingers. And secondly, do not push these too tightly together. All right, they should just barely be touching and not totally smushed together. Okay, otherwise you're robbing yourself of surface area. And as I taught you a long time ago, surface area equals flavor. And then what we'll do once that's set is take a paper towel or two and try to wipe off most of the excess marinade from the meat and the plate. All right, a little bit's okay, but we generally don't want to put super wet things on a grill. So that's looking good. And then a couple last things before we head outside. I'm going to drizzle over a little bit of vegetable oil, and we'll sort of brush that all over. And then last but not least, if we want, and I did, I'm going to give it one more little sprinkling of salt, on all sides. And that's it, our tandoori lamb is ready for the grill. So I'm going to go ahead and set that down over some beautiful glowing coals. Okay, remember, we always wait for the flames to go away. And what we'll do is grill these for about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the size of your chunks, or until that meat's somewhere between medium rare and medium. And for this recipe, and most recipes where I use a yogurt marinade, I don't want to cook over extremely high heat. Alright, I would describe this as kind of medium to medium high. And my usual game plan is to cook that for about 5 minutes aside, and then I'll just start randomly turning them around until I'm happy. And I find this kind of thing too small to use a thermometer, so I just go until they kind of spring back to the touch. Okay, so that felt a little bit rare, and by rare I mean mushy, so I gave it a couple more minutes. And by the way, to take the pressure off, if you overcook this a little bit, because of this marinade, it's still going to be beautifully juicy and flavorful. So try to relax. In fact, for something like this, I would always err on the side of a minute too long versus a minute undercooked. But anyway, I'm sure you'll figure it out. And once I determined mine was done, I went ahead and pulled it off the grill and headed inside, where I thought it came out looking very nice. Although the appearance was outdone by the aroma. I mean, this stuff just smells incredible. And then as far as service goes, I like to do these on top of some grilled red onions, maybe with some freakishly small lemon wedges. And I finished up with some freshly chopped cilantro, or coriander, as they would call it on that British baking show. And that's it. What I personally consider tandoori lamb is done. So let me go ahead and unskewer a piece and go in for a taste. And while I'm not exactly sure how close this is going to be to the lamb tandoori at your favorite Indian restaurant, I can tell you it's going to be very moist and extremely flavorful. And as you can see, that meat stayed nice and pink. Although, like I said, and I probably shouldn't even tell you this, but even if you cook this medium well, or even a little past that, you are still going to get a fantastic product. Speaking of which, if you make some nice little small but slightly thicker Lebanese mountain breads, those top with some cilantro chutney, and top that with 2 or 3 chunks of meat and some grilled onions, and finish it with some lemon and cilantro, you will have created the world's first lamb tandoori slider. Well, actually, I guess technically I did. But you know what? You guys go ahead and take the credit. I got the job. But anyway, that was as incredibly delicious as it looked. I mean, I could have eaten like 4 of these, and possibly did. But anyway, that's it. My take on tandoori lamb. Whether you end up using lamb like we did here, or try it with chicken, or pork, or sacred cow. Although, you know what? Forget the beef. That could be bad karma. But regardless of what meat you use this delicious marinade for, I really do hope you give it a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.